exactly with the system.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's a siren.
Right. You're,
Thanks for
you're
that
on her,
information.
moving forward, you would turn right to your house and left to our house. If you're going straight would be that Creekwood Trail area. You're literally a block away. Okay. So you probably know our house. It's people from.
Deeds are on, it makes much of a difference.
It is. They refer to it as the Andrews house because the Andrews family lives in it. It looks like it belongs in Williamsburg.
I just did,
Somewhat.
because I only touched
Very
it,
aggressive.
one time? Lots of construction trucks.
Exactly. We've got a construction.
But yeah, I did not
Just
know
put a
that.
couple to exactly. That's us. Those built an addition, so the porch is half of the addition. But it's
Hey, we're still live and set.
oh, we're live now.
We're live, yeah.
What time is it?
7.
7.
Basiliadis.
Arch is a physician and works at the Central Virginia Health Services, right behind the hospital.
In practice.
My father just retired.
You darn it. Okay. Okay.
He was slowly going back on his days.
Okay.
He was working 1 day a week, and he had given up his admitting privileges years ago. That's kind of like the first invitation that someone wants to retire. But I think that he turns 82 this year, and I guess he's just upset. I think he's ready to end it.
So travel.
I think this is his first month not working.
For him.
Anyways, let's see what's going on here.
Thank you.
Nice to talk to you. Thanks for introducing yourself. Okay, so. I'm with you. I'm good. I can feel it over there.
It is a good day when the parking spots are all taken up on Main Street.
Hey there, how are you?
Good.
Good to see you.
Cam is on his way up.
He is, okay. Well,
So Jane wasn't here, Sharon was, and she will have to be there.
They got nervous there. I saw Sherry did, but Jane, she was like, she's like, come to eat. He's like, I can come and meet you, but, yes, decision
The meeting will come to order. Ms. Watkins, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Miller,
Here.
Ms. O'Connor,
Here.
Ms. Honeycutt, Ms. Johnson, Mr. Davenport,
Here.
Mr. Patterson,
Here.
Mr. Crute.
Thank you very much. The next item of business is the approval of the agenda. The agenda has been distributed. Are there any corrections?
A motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Mr. Patterson has motioned to approve the agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Abby has seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the motion passes. The next item of business is the consideration of the minutes. The minutes have likewise been distributed. Are there any amendments, any additions? Do I hear a motion to adopt the minutes?
So moved. Second.
Okay, let's see. Blanking. Jerry made a motion to pass the amendment, to adopt the amendments, and Cam made a second. By voice acclamation, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. The next item of business is public participation. Mr. Pamba, do we have anybody who would like to participate?
We haven't received any requests to speak either in person or online. We did receive one written statement. I will summarize it for, to at least get some of it into the record, but I will summarize it for, in the interest of time.
Before you do that, can you just provide a little context on what Mr. Shule is writing about, please? Thank you. In addition to summarizing it. Thank you.
Sure. So, Mr. Shule, Matt Shule, is the, he is the vice president of the Shule Furniture Company, which has a location here in the town of Farmville, and they submitted for a variance before the Board of Zoning Appeals, which heard that case last month and denied it 3-2. What they were looking for was a variance to the to both the sign area and the sign height regulations in the B3 district. That would have been the third such variance application that the Board of Zoning Appeals had heard in 2 years, which I think for a town of this size is that's pretty frequent. In any case, after the denial, a letter was sent to his consultant and CC'd to him. I met him at the meeting, and he did indicate that he was going to submit a statement, because I informed him that we were also looking at the signage regulations to see what can be done in terms of adjusting them so that we can receive fewer variance applications while still accommodating the goals of the comprehensive plan in terms of keeping Farmville small town in appearance, having that curb appeal, having that aesthetic that you would expect from a small rural Virginia town. So with that being said, he did follow up on his intent to submit a written statement. And again, just to summarize, their location, 105 Marywood Farm Road, which is next to the Walmart essentially, he is writing in support of amending the town code to increase the amount of signage allowed for businesses like his in the B3 zone. He feels that the regulations as they're currently written is more of a one-size-fits-all approach to signage. And again, he did apply for that variance, and it was struck down, or the request was denied 3-2 on April 28th. He indicated that Shule Home is a local business that has been in Central Virginia for 125 years and in Farmville for 43 years. So it was founded in 1897 in Lynchburg, so it's a local company, and he just wanted to, emphasize that point that they are a local business. They're not a national chain, as it were. But in any case, they opened their first store here in their store here in Farmville in 1979. So they've been here for several years. The reason for their sign request is that they're currently rebranding. So when they want to take that sign down and they put up their new sign, they're going to have to comply with the new regulations, which were again adopted in June of 2020, June 10th of 2020. So in any case, he invites the Planning Commission to go to the store to take a look at it. He'd be more than happy to provide you with a tour, and he encourages the Planning Commission to consider that when it is deliberating the signage regulations and adjusting those. And that's the only statement that we received, either in person or remotely. That's the only request for for a statement to the Planning Commission. With that being said, we do have a couple of folks in the audience, and I would just invite them, if they would like to approach the mic, then we don't have any other comments at this time.
So just regarding Mr. Shule's letter, that if memory serves me, the signage ordinance is one of the first priority things that we're going to address next month. And so we'll have more conversation, more details on that. Okay, great, thank you. Yes, welcome, Mr. Weiss. Dr. Basilidis, is that right? Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us. Anything you'd like to share or comment or anything?
Say something briefly. My name is Rhett Weiss. We live at 809 4th Avenue in Farmville. New residents, moved here in December. So we've been here all of however many months that is, 5 months or so. I'm not here to speak on anything in particular on the agenda. In fact, I wasn't planning on speaking at all. I'm here just to observe and listen because I saw the ad in the local paper about seeking citizen volunteers for the Planning Commission, and I have, over my career, some background in this subject. And so I'm considering just submitting my application, and I thought I'd best come and listen and learn how things go on. So here I am. It's that simple. Happy to entertain any questions, but that's really the only reason we're here.
Again, welcome to the community, and really glad you both could be here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr.
Thank you for
Patterson.
being interested. Appreciate
Thank you.
that.
And tonight's a good meeting. We got a lot of information on kind of the way ahead for the Planning Commission and for the town.
Good. Looking forward to it. Thanks again.
Okay, if there's no one else care to say anything, there's no other indicated interest ahead of time, our next item of business is staff updates.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Just really briefly, staff updates. In the packet, you received the monthly department report. Again, as usual, as customary, there is both qualitative and quantitative information in that report in terms of permits issued, reviewed, building permits, zoning permits, the ridership for the FAB, as well as the amount of fuel that was sold at the Farmville Regional Airport. Training that the staff has conducted, as well as some updates in terms of what the boards and commissions have been doing over the past month. The staff held interviews for the building official position last week, and we had two really good interviewees, candidates. We continue to receive applications. The ad was that we would accept applications until the position was filled. We are considering our 2 applicants at this time, but that process is, it's in progress, and hopefully we'll make a decision soon on that. The Board of Zoning Appeals met on April 28th. They're not scheduled to meet in May. but they will be meeting in June on the aforementioned sign variance that we received. So Cam, put that on your calendar. Again, the Board of Zoning Appeals, when they met on April 28th, that was the application that Mr. Shewell was writing about. His was the only case for that on the docket that night. Next update, tomorrow, we will be holding our development processes information session. That's tomorrow, May 19th, it's Thursday, and we've got 13 participants, attendees who have signed up and ready to go, and that will start tomorrow at 9. We do have 12 more spaces open, so if anyone's listening who would like to participate in that, we won't turn you away at the door. If you do show up, we would just need to know your name and your affiliation and that kind of thing, and we just get that information. But we do have enough participants to go ahead and do that. We've known that for a while. We had really good response from the very beginning. So we're very excited to present this information. Basically, what that's going to be is a Farmville Zoning and Subdivision Ordinance 101 type course, if you will. Really, when you think about it, we're not going to be able to cover everything tomorrow, but kind of liken that to the first day of class, where we would probably have other sessions later on in the year. I had mentioned before that this is something that we would probably do semi-annually, maybe every 4 months, at least every 6 months, and maybe have a couple of them a year. So that's tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and we'll be ready bright and early to present this information. Finally, the Certified Planning Commissioner Program, I slipped a memo in your packet on that. I know that we've got several folks here who are certified. The current session that our staff member Ashley Atkins Austin, as well as Planning Commissioner Jane Johnson, are taking, that will conclude next week. But there are 2 other sessions this year. There are also 2 sessions for the BZA, Certified BZA program. So if you're not certified, consider signing up for one of the classes later on this year. There is funding, so don't worry about that. If you are interested, contact Michelle Watkins, our administrative assistant, and she will hook you up. And that concludes the updates from staff.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions about the staff report? I had one. I noticed that you participated in the STEPS Housing Services brief. Is there anything kind of relevant worth passing about what you learned there at that meeting?
Well, as you know, I'm still relatively new here. There's going to come a time where I can't say that anymore, but I'm still getting out in the community and meeting people and understanding their roles and what their agencies do, what they're capable of doing, and where we can partner as a as a town community development agency. Just some of those natural fits for for partnering and for acting on certain issues. The comprehensive plan, as you all know, is a very broad-based advisory document that covers a lot of ground. And one of those issues that's covered is housing. So when I first got here, I was informed that STEPS was like one of the big players when it comes to workforce housing, affordable housing, addressing homelessness here in the Central Virginia area. So it made sense for me to go talk to Sharon and to go talk to Sean Rosier and just understand a little bit more about what they do, and then likewise tell them a little bit about where I intend on taking the community development department. So, when Dr. Scott Davis had reorganized essentially this function, it's a development, comprehensive planning, transportation agency. So housing is just one of those really important issues that can positively or negatively impact this community. And again, I like to tell my own personal housing story whenever I move to a new community. First of all, having gone to Strasburg, it was incredibly difficult to find housing there. I consider myself lucky to find the place that I did at the monthly rent that I did. Same thing here. I looked mightily for 2-3 months for a place to buy, couldn't find anything. Again, incredibly lucky to find the place that I found. So my story is typical, but then when you think about some of the other issues out there that aren't so lucky, you know, it's that part of it that that the town and nonprofits like STEPS can can partner on to try to address. So that meeting wasn't anything more than kind of an introductory. It was the first time that I had met Sharon Harrop, and basically it's just my way of trying to get out and understand the lay of the land here.
I think it was like 2 years ago they put out that study about low income and affordable housing and workforce housing here, and I mean, yeah, that was eye opening in terms of the lack of available, safe, and affordable housing. And you're right, it's something that is in a comprehensive plan, but it affects economic development and municipal workers and young professionals. That's good. Thank you. Other questions? So our next item of business is we're going to jump to new business since there isn't any old business, and it's the zoning and the subdivision ordinance review. And if y'all recollect from our last meeting, Mr. Pambid said, hey, there's a number of things that they've discovered as a consequence of permits applied for, as a consequence of a new set of eyes on our zoning and subdivision ordinance review. And some just emergent trends and best practices. And if you'll notice, under new business, there's nothing that we're voting on. And so in talking with Mr. Pambid prior to the meeting today, he's given us a list that was a part of our packet. And so rather than saying, having action items, these are, I think, chiefly going to be informational items today. We can certainly make them discussion items, but in talking with Mr. Pambid, the way he kind of explained it was problems that are aspire to be solved and problems aspiring to be avoided, and so kind of giving us the big picture of what these are, but also what the pace of these input. Public hearings, making recommendations is. And so you'll notice that there's some degree of specificity, but by and large, there's not a whole lot of details or recommendations that the staff has made yet. I think that's a consequence, if I remember correctly, based on all the work you're doing with the workshop. Thank you very much for doing that, as well as the day-to-day operational tempo, but also kind of planning this out. And so I think it behoove us or be prudent to think about this as kind of a listening session tonight to kind of manage our expectations and think about where we're going to be going for the next few months or longer. And Mr. Pam is going to break that down for us a little bit more detail, including the priorities and a timeline for us. So please share that information.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that was a very nice and broad overview of our intent tonight. So when we met last month, again, there was no actual business other than to have the session on ethics, but as part of your update, one of those quote-unquote new business items or staff items, staff update items was to highly recommend that you hold a meeting in May, which is tonight, because what we needed to do as the staff was to essentially lay out your workload, and that's what it's going to be, is a lot of activities over the next, certainly from now until September, and then from September on. What we're doing tonight is an ordinance review, at least for, just some high-level items for some sections that we feel need to be amended. It is a significant list of recommended changes. You have that list that was presented to you in your packet most recently. As I mentioned last month, this is a seriously heavy lift. It will require multiple rounds of public hearings, meaning the Planning Commission will make its recommendations to the Town Council, each body having a public hearing on the matter. So what we've done is we've taken what we consider, based off of certain comments that we've received, observations that we've made, a list of priority amendments broken down into 2 blocks. Now, you'll notice that the rest of the list is not directly addressed in tonight's briefing, but you can consider the rest of those issues, code sections, what have you, in future blocks, block 3, block 4, block 5, however many it takes to get through them. But there are 2 blocks of amendments that we feel need to be taken immediately. A couple of them you might even consider under a crash program that we really need to buckle down and get these done. So these amendments consist of new regulations, and then some of them are going to be minor adjustments and some of them are going to be major adjustments. We will tell you obviously which is which when the time comes. Now, again, as I had mentioned last week, or rather last month, and even just a couple of seconds ago, staff has been listening and observing. We've been listening to the Planning Commission, for example. We've been listening to the town manager because Scott had basically shepherded the ordinance, the zoning ordinance, the subdivision ordinance, and the comprehensive plan all together. That was adopted in one meeting, but since then, there has been a lot of permitting activity, a lot of inquiries, a lot of questions, which we all throw in the hopper and say, hey, this is all pointing to certain issues or certain code sections that we need to change to, again, as Dr. Miller said, to avoid problems and to address problems. So some of it is being reactive and some of it's being proactive. So again, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to frame the Planning Commission's workload over the next several months. And it will be a several-month process to get through this list, and tonight is just a high-level overview only. So we obviously encourage you to ask questions, but we'll just say that staff has got a pretty clear idea in its mind as to what the language should be and what those recommendations should be come next month for your first couple of rounds. Okay, so 2 blocks of amendments. The first block is due in July. What we expect to handle in that first block: height regulations. Flagpoles are not addressed in the ordinance. Height exceptions for things like church steeples, cupolas for houses, those types of chimneys, those types of features. Now, we do have height regulations for telecommunications towers, but the word granary, for example. Now, we don't have any agricultural uses in town, but I suppose that it could be possible that at some point somebody wants to do that. We'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it. But certainly churches, flagpoles, cupolas, things of that sort, they're not addressed in the zoning ordinance. So we do want to establish some common sense but specific regulations when it comes to height. Sign ordinance revisions. You've heard me talk about the sign ordinance, and I've only been here for 6 months. I would say I've probably been talking about the sign ordinance for half that time. There's clearly a need to address the sign ordinance simply just based off of the number of variance applications that we're getting. Again, I still feel like there's a way to balance the interests of the business community that wants visibility. Unfortunately, not everybody can be in a high visibility location, but we also need to balance that interest with the wider community interest in terms of its aesthetics, how it presents, not being overrun by large signs, that kind of thing. So we will certainly be mentioning the previous conversations that the Planning Commission and the Town Council had with the community when it was adopting the zoning ordinance and when it was adopting the comprehensive plan. As an aside, we're 2 years into both the ordinances and the comprehensive plan, and when you I'm sure that the comprehensive plan process the last time took several months, probably over a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe even closer to 2 years. You might be able to tell me that a little bit better. But in any case, we're almost halfway through a 5-year cycle where, as you know, by state law, their localities, number one, are supposed to have a comprehensive plan, but number two, they have to be reviewed every 5 years. Note the term reviewed. It doesn't say that you have to revise it, but I think that a progressive community is going to be constantly adjusting its vision, adjusting its future land use, adjusting its goals and objectives. So I guess technically a community can give it the old college try and say, hey, we looked at our comprehensive plan, and then make a statement to that effect and say we passed, we've complied with state law. But be that as it may, a progressive community like Farmville is probably going to want to take a good hard look at it every 5 years. So when you think about how long it takes to do that, we're going to be rolling up on that in another year or so.
Will council dictate the terms for what that review process will look like?
I would certainly imagine as the ultimate authority in this town that they could provide some input, but the staff will certainly will be guided by state law, first of all, and also by best practices. Maybe some new, what's the word that I'm looking for? Maybe some new movement in the planning field. But the staff is going to be driving a lot of that timeline for sure. Everything from, hey, you're coming up on this. We need to budget for this. We need to, so there's a practical, I guess a practical element to this. It's not a cheap thing to look at it. It's possible that staff could do it, but again, as we're taking a look at just our next 6 to 9 to 12 months, and then you extrapolate everything else that needs to be done in order to comply with state law, we would want to program a comprehensive plan review and revision in there somewhere.
I think one of the things that made that process really strong is the amount of community input. So I think if we can find some way to think about how we might incorporate that during the review process, might not be a bad thing.
So bringing it back home, sign ordinance revisions, that's going to be part of our crash program for the next month and a half, 2 months, getting to a town council public hearing in July. Now, there's a third bullet point under the first block of ordinance amendments, and that's application fees. The application fee structure needs to be very closely looked at and formalized. So we have not, to my knowledge, done anything with the application fees. This is done by council resolution. This is straight out of the zoning ordinance. So while the Planning Commission does not have a part in setting that, that's more of a financial matter. The staff is going to recommend a list of fees along with the list of services that we provide. There are a lot of things that we, quite frankly, don't charge for that we really should be charging for. So moving on to the second block that's due in September. couple of points here. The Moton Museum Gateway Overlay District. So as we've been mentioning over the past couple of months, the Moton Museum is trying to achieve its World Heritage status, and part of that is having essentially a protective overlay district. So that's something that we will be looking at in August for a September Town Council review and decision. Along with that second block are the setback revisions. So let me just find myself in my notes here. For setbacks, what we want to do is we want to review and revise the bulk regulations chart and the associated definitions for the terms setback, yard, frontage, and lot width. I see some issues that we could potentially have when it comes to interpreting those, and what I'd like to do is to tighten those up a little bit. There are different ways of measuring setbacks in the bulk regulations chart, which could potentially also cause some confusion. In my opinion, there's a difference between frontage and lot width, although it seems like that they're being used interchangeably in the ordinance. So setbacks is something that we want to adjust. One of the questions that I'm also going to be asking about setbacks is, especially in the residential districts, does it make sense to have a deeper front yard than a backyard? That was one of the things that I found, let's just say, unique about the Farmville ordinance. I had never seen the requirement for a larger front yard than a larger backyard. If you really want to stick to a neo-traditional design, neighborhood design, then you're going to want your house a little bit closer to the front yard. Now, I'm not proposing that it be a zero setback in the front, but say, for example, in certain residential districts, the front yard setback may be 25 or 35, and the rear yard setback is 15. I've normally seen that flipped, and I would think that most people would find more function out of a larger backyard than a larger front yard. So that's a question that I'm going to pose when it comes time to talk about setbacks. So
Can I just share something? So this is great. It's especially the overlay district. It's an opportunity to implement some of the proposals and the guidance and the comprehensive plan earlier rather than later. And maybe, forgive me if you're going to address this on the next slide, but when you say first block due in July, second block due in September, that's in the sense of town council and staff, aspiring to have that on their docket so they can have a public hearing and vote on it in those months.
that's correct, sir. So due July and due September means town council decision. So when we get to the next slide, I'll show you essentially what that overall timeline is going to look like for each block. But when I say due in July, I mean that's when the town council is going to vote on it, which means the planning commission will issue its recommendation in June. So here's the timeline. This lays it out just a little bit more specifically in terms of when, who, and what. Again, that first block of amendments due in July, which means a public hearing in July by the town council, but starting at the very beginning, starting essentially right now, we've already started to consider some of this stuff. In May and June, the staff will be crafting the language, and of course, more specifically, we compile that craft language and we're going to provide that to you. I would say probably maybe just a little bit sooner than you're accustomed to seeing your preliminary agenda, or rather your final agenda. So again, you receive a preliminary agenda that gives you a heads up about 3 to 4 weeks in advance saying, hey, you're going to have a meeting, and then you have a final agenda that comes out a couple weeks later with the specifics about that meeting, staff reports, exhibits, maps, drawings, that kind of thing. In this case, it's going to be draft ordinance language. So June 15th, your recommendation will be done at a public hearing. So this is your very first warning that you're going to have a meeting in June. You'll get
No vacations that week.
And then in July, council, as usual, has 2 meetings every month. The first meeting being a work session, and the second meeting being their regular meeting. Work sessions are held just for the listening public. First Wednesday of the month at 11 a.m. Those are also live streamed, and then the second Wednesday of the month is their regular meeting, which is typically held in the evening, second Wednesday at 7 p.m. So again, for this first block of amendments, July 6th and 13th, work session on the 6th, public hearing on the 13th. Any questions about this timeline so far?
So just to clarify, y'all, it sounds like we're going to get the specific language early on, and then we'll have a chance to look at it and think about it, and then we'll talk about it at the meeting, have the public hearing, and make a recommendation.
Now, with that being said, of course, the phone lines are always open. You know, if you've heard me over the past couple of minutes talk about some of the general things that we want to discuss, for instance, the sign ordinance. We want to make it a little bit easier for businesses. We want somewhat larger signs in the B2 and B3 district, but not so large that it makes us look like every other, Broad Street or Midlothian Turnpike or what have you. We don't want that here. That much is clear. I've heard that loud and clear from the Planning Commission, from my predecessors, meaning Scott Davis, who was the zoning administrator in the past, the comprehensive plan. We've got so many justifications for doing this, but only taking it so far. So again, if you have any ideas or anything that you want to throw in the hopper, certainly give me a call. If I'm not available, Ashley is also familiar with the issue. So there's that. The second block of amendments due in September. Here's the timeline. Again, June and July. Rather, the staff will first take a stab at the language, at the ordinance. First couple of months, we'll compile that. Because there is a mapping component to the Moton Museum Overlay District, Gateway Overlay District, we will have to do some mapping, and we'll probably have to talk with the property owners or the folks who are interested in that area. So we hope to do some public outreach on this one, on the Moton Museum Gateway Overlay District. So that'll take a little bit longer. Now, earlier this year, the staff had met with Cam Patterson at the museum, staff meeting me and Scott, the town manager, and just kind of laid out when would it be appropriate to bring this, because there is a timeline on Cam's side as well. These things have to be accomplished before a certain date in order to be eligible for this designation. So when we talked earlier this year, we were kind of looking at the end of summer, which would be kind of that August, September timeframe. Which brings me to the next couple of rows here. August 17th, Planning Commission will have a public hearing to discuss its recommendation to the Town Council. And again, the following couple of weeks after that, September 7th, which again is the first Wednesday, work session for the council. September 14th, second Wednesday, regular council meeting, 7 p.m. They'll hold their public hearing and make a decision. So on the Block 2 amendments, which are the setbacks and the Moton Museum Gateway Overlay District and its timeline, are there any questions?
think the only thing I'm thinking is, you know, with the new folks that might potentially be coming on board with vacancies that we have, just making sure that we prioritize orientation. It's a rarity in our work that you jump right into some heavy-handed items. So just making sure people can hit the ground running in that regard.
All right, thank you. So, moving on to the rest of the list, and again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of each one of these, but these are just the really high-level issues that you can kind of categorize all the different items in the list that I presented you into one of these 5 categories here. So, other amendments. These are, I think that they're all important, but these are not the high priority ones that we can start to address these, maybe say September on. So if you want to call it like a block 3 and do a, well, it's unfortunate that after that we're kind of heading into the holiday season with, you know, is Halloween holiday? So you got October, and then you also have, Thanksgiving and Christmas and all of the other religious holidays kind of in that same time frame, which, as we did in January, the Planning Commission had approved its list of dates, its meeting dates, and you, of course, you understand that in November and December, those meetings are going to be pushed up a week. So what does that look like for the workload and for staff's ability to get that done? So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We've got a lot ahead of us right now in the, you know, staring us in the face for May and June, heading into July for Block 1. But just some examples of community and design standards. So there's a section in the zoning ordinance entitled Community and Design Standards, and talking about things like, well, what does your multifamily apartments and townhouses look like? Fences, lighting standards. We don't have any lighting standards. I suggest that we get some. Sidewalks. We don't have a whole lot of, I think that our sidewalk requirements could be beefed up, especially as it pertains to multifamily. So we do require sidewalks for developments in the business district, but I would submit that if you're going to increase residential density, you're going to increase pedestrian activity as well, but we don't require sidewalk for multifamily, which is something that I feel like we should fix. All of this is found under the community and design standards. Standards for specific uses. Planning Commission had discussed mightily with its first conditional use permit of the year, accessory dwellings. So what does that, how do we need to tweak that? Some questions about home occupations. It's a pretty permissive standard right now, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I've got a question about retail. Now, the zoning administrator has a lot of, we'll just say latitude to make interpretations, and I'm certainly able to do that, but I think that in order for an interpretation to be defensible, there should be a little bit more to it in the regulation. So interpretation means a couple of different things. It's definitely a double-edged sword where if you make the wrong interpretation, then you open yourself up to some sort of legal liability. But interpretation on the positive side means flexibility too. So again, trying to strike that balance between regulation and flexibility and allowing people to do what they want within certain boundaries. Solar facilities, we've gotten a lot of inquiries on solar facilities, and our ordinance is practically silent on solar. So, you know, you will find the occasional rooftop solar on a house. That's not really an issue, but when we start talking about some of the utility scale stuff, then we're getting some inquiries on that. So the strict interpretation is If we don't have it in our ordinance, then it's not allowed, but this could potentially be a good thing for the community in terms of a revenue generating source, but also, you know, when you're talking about the really high level stuff in terms of climate change and renewable energy, you know, price of fuel is just shot up right now. Air quality, air pollution, things of that sort. That's what we're kind of contending with when we get you know, essentially an off the street inquiry or phone call. Hey, what are your solar ordinances? Scott and I are still chewing on that one, how far we want to go with it, but I just wanted to go ahead and put it on the list just so that you're aware that it is something that we're dealing with, you know. Let's see, food trucks, you know, just a very basic amendment to the food truck hours. I think that personally food trucks are a good thing, but much like the signage regulations, I think that there are some things that we really need to look at in terms of when we allow these. You know, one of the hours just didn't quite jive in my mind, and the staff had kind of kicked that around and said, we can't get our arms around why you would allow a little bit later, or why would you require a later food truck on Saturday as opposed to a work day or a school day. So anyway, those are just some of the issues when it comes to the standards for specific uses. Use matrix or use matrices or matrix and definitions. You know, we're talking about adding solar facilities potentially. I did get an inquiry on skills-based gambling, skills-based gaming machines. It really depends on the locality, on how they want to interpret that. My strict interpretation is that is not a video game, so it's not something that I would it's something that we want to be really careful with. And if we want to specifically exclude it, then we need to be more specific in our ordinances.
Isn't that still being decided at the state level in terms of how the state will embrace or not embrace school games?
It is being discussed at the state level. I believe that at the state level, the last governor had essentially pulled back on that, saying that they're not going to be allowed anymore. But then there was I think essentially either a court case or a legal decision from a judge at some level saying that there's going to be a moratorium on that ban. So it's a mess.
I mean, from a town's perspective, there's no reason why we couldn't have our ordinance clear even if something's going on at state level, correct? Or do we have to wait for some more clear guidance from the state on skill-based games? Or
I think that if it's something that we want to exclude, then we should exclude it. So to your question, do we need to wait for guidance from on high? I think that land use is a local decision, and in this case, you know, if someone were to say, hey, I want to do this, I'm probably going to tell them no, but I would like some backup in the ordinance, at least have the discussion. Okay, so further on down the list of use matrices and definitions, one of the other things, cannabis-related uses, I feel like it's something that we should be prepared for. Cannabis-related uses, as we know, are becoming increasingly legal depending on the specific use. Certainly sales up to a certain amount, possession, that kind of thing. But as it pertains to economic development prospects, and right now we don't have a specific manufacturing district, but I do know that there are prospects out there who are looking at it in terms of, you know, kind of along the same scale as a craft brewery, where they're not looking at doing it, you know, on a large scale, but more of on a smaller scale. And is that something that we would be interested in? If we want to be competitive from an economic development standpoint, then perhaps we do look at that as an allowable use. Use matrix and definitions, going further down the list, clarification on townhouses. I think that's kind of a minor item. That's more of a possible tweak in the language. I won't get too far in depth in that one. Next bullet point for site plan and subdivision processes, there are some other items that I feel also need to be clarified. There is one, I want to say, unique feature of the, or unique requirement of the subdivision ordinance where a preliminary plat could be looked at a higher level of scrutiny. I think I've got the authority to bring it to the Planning Commission, but I want to check into that a little bit more. That might change this list a little bit as far as subdivision processes, but final plats, possibly making administrative, minor subdivisions. Right now, the only subdivision that I'm allowed to approve, to review and approve at my level is a lot split from 1 to 2 lots. There are other communities that go as high as 4. 3 might not be out of the realm of reason for us, but it's something that I put on the list just to, as a placeholder. I may come back and say, you know, well, or someone will tell me, no, you know, the Planning Commission and the Town Council wants to review any subdivision that entails 3 lots or more. You know, that's up to, you know, up to other folks, I suppose. But that's one of the things that that I had put on the list here. So other tweaks like that. One of the other things that Scott had asked me to be prepared for was a more robust set of design standards for planned unit developments, urban mixed use, and traditional neighborhood design. So these are the concepts that you hear a lot about, especially in some of the suburban locations and even more urban locations. But our subdivision ordinance and our zoning ordinance requirements actually force developers to do cookie cutter development. So I know that's a bad word, but it's a fact when you look at what the requirements are, and there's no flexibility to vary those design standards. You know, for instance, when I talked earlier about revising the setbacks so that you can have a shallower front yard, which is more along the lines of a traditional neighborhood design element, we could not do it without an ordinance amendment. So that's why this item is here. So PUD, planned unit development.
I'm sorry, just to kind of step back for clarification. So when you're saying more robust design standards, are you talking about creating more uniformity or revising it for more flexibility? Or is it more complicated than that?
It's going to be a little bit more complicated than that, but the answer to your question, I would say, is both.
Okay.
You know, when you're talking about a planned unit development or an urban mixed-use development or a traditional neighborhood design, there are some mechanisms out there that we can insert into our, put into our ordinance that allows for everybody to come to the table and say, look, your ordinances say this, but we want to do this. So there would still be a legislative process involved where the Planning Commission would look at, obviously the staff would look at it first, but then the Planning Commission would look at it. The Town Council would ultimately say, yeah, I think we can sign on to this concept, and then all of the other design processes after that would be pursuant to that plan that was conceptually agreed to. I know it's kind of difficult to envision, but again, there are other localities that, that do it that way, and it's not something that you would certainly take on lightly. But it does allow for some flexibility in what would essentially be a different looking neighborhood.
Going back to the height exceptions with flagpoles in particular, is that 25 to 30 foot maximum height similar to what Prince Edward adopted Tuesday?
I haven't seen their specific language, although I think that they were kind of maxing out at 30.
Okay.
I think that for us, 30 is still a little bit too high. What I will say, especially in a residential district, and I would say, over half, maybe even 2/3 of the town is zoned residential, we can certainly get that figure for you. But with that being said, we just don't have any maximum height requirements in our districts when it comes to flagpoles.
So I've still got time to erect my large Moton flagpole.
Hush, hush.
I thought you were going to put a Moton sign that you could see on 460 on the way in. Like a Love's truck stop.
So just put it in perspective, the flag out here, is that, what would you guess that? I'm just trying to get my height perspective of 25 to 30 foot.
Your typical downtown light pole is going to be about 12 to 15 feet tall. That's probably, what, twice that? It's probably 30 feet tall. What I will say also is that that Prince Edward County, and if you were listening to the town council meeting the other night, County Administrator Doug Stanley had basically briefed the council on a variety of issues, one of them being the front lawn of the courthouse and that rehab project. So they will be doing some flagpoles there. The height of those flagpoles are going to be 30 feet. But again, we want to be very specific about the flagpole heights within the town limits. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, my slide deck shows that I don't have any other bullet points to really address, so I'll just turn it back over to you, Dr. Miller, or to the commission. If you have any questions for me, I'm certainly more than happy to try to address those. Again, phone lines are open. You can call me at the office and we can discuss it offline as well.
What questions or thoughts you all got?
I think we have long yearned to pick up the pace of what we are doing and what we can contribute. So I'm really excited just to see the things we will have before us. We're going to be working, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a very good thing, and I'm happy to hear you say we're going to start thinking about the review process for the comprehensive plan, because I think one of the reasons why it took us so long last time was it had not been reviewed in so long. So I appreciate your guidance on all this, and thank you very much for this. The timelines and everything about what we're going to be doing was real helpful.
Yep, I will also add that, again, I just can't stress enough or emphasize enough that this is going to be a heavy lift for staff. We're very happy to do it. We are at the same time conducting standard, operations through, we have to pick up the phones and we have to serve the public that walks in the front door. We have to go out into the field and do our inspections and that kind of thing. So the pace or the tempo, as Dr. Miller had mentioned, is very high right now, and it's going to be high for the foreseeable future. This timeline and all of these other operational activities that we do on a daily basis does not account for some of the other major land use cases that we could potentially receive. Someone may come in tomorrow and say, here's a subdivision for 20 lots, or here is a rezoning because we want to do X in this area, or again, we received variance applications, so those also take a lot of staff time to be thoughtful and thorough and objective and fair about it. So we take those applications obviously very seriously, and that's just what I would consider an X factor, because those are some of the things that we can't account for in our workload, but we have to accommodate when they come.
Is there any further business? Well, if there's no further business, do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move we adjourn the meeting.
All right, Ms. O'Connor has made a motion. Mr. Patterson has seconded, and I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.